And
Woo.
that as every week's been, it has been just another roller coaster of event after event after event.
I know.
Today we find out that Donald Trump has been in close contact with Vladimir Putin while he's campaigning. And that is like, if, if that was Harry, Harry would not be here right now because he would already be locked away in a prison. They'd throw away the key. That
Yeah.
is amazing.
I'd be totally done. That'd be it for me.
One of the other things I want to talk about along that line is that the Republicans and especially Trump and Vance have made a explicit strategy of outright lies about Hurricane Helene, the fact that FEMA is not doing stuff. I mean, that it's been a complete disaster. And Ken has been somebody through the miracles of social media that we've recently connected. And he's from that part of the world. So, Ken, I'd like to get your first person report on the ground truth view.
Truth.
What's really going on there? Ken?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, before I say anything, I want to make it pretty clear. I don't actually live in the disaster area. I live near Greensboro, so I'm kind of on the edge of it. So I don't want to come on, and claim, I'm one of the disaster victims or whatever. We got pretty lucky, had a couple of trees down and power out for a couple hours, but it was not major. But the way that I did end up actually being part of that, I suppose, is that last week on Thursday and Friday, I was volunteering with an organization called Operation Airdrop. And what started that was that I was an Army veteran. I used to work with helicopters. And so they were using helicopters and fixed wing planes to fly supplies from Charlotte bases where people were donating this stuff up into these mountain airstrips, give them to people. And I thought, well, that's something I can help with. I did a long time ago, but I did that. Well, by the time I got there, it turned out they had reallocated all the helicopters to search and rescue operations. So my 30-year-old skills were pretty useless. And so I kind of resigned myself to just packing boxes of bug spray. We were loading them on planes and getting them up there. And they came and said that some roads had opened up in the area and they were looking for people with pickup trucks. And I guess people that, seemed capable. And I'm a little bit of a redneck, so I guess the four-wheel drive truck and all that jazz. And they were going to load up a convoy of trucks and send them up into the mountains because my one truck can carry 4 times the amount of a small plane, to get some forward distribution centers set up with all these supplies. And I agreed and said, yeah, it sounds, different. So we loaded up all these trucks with everything they could handle, and we headed up into the site where we eventually got to was near Canton, which is probably about 30 minutes west of Asheville, kind of in the real heart of the disaster zone. And I got back, and so I did that on Thursday, and then one more convoy on Friday. Friday evening, I put up a post on Facebook that was kind of explaining my experiences, a little bit of what I saw, and how much of the garbage that I saw on social media was just nonsense conspiracy theories. And then I intended it to be writing a little funny post to my friends, and then this exploded. I think I've got 5,000 shares, something like that.
That's awesome.
Well, I think what happened was initially it started to go viral because there was such a hunger for information out of that disaster area. There's a real vacuum after the fact. Then it got shared to a couple of groups who really sort of fixated on me saying, look, I saw FEMA all over the place. The military was all over the place. It struck me as being an incredibly effective response. And so then it kind of took on a political spin and cascaded even more than that, which wasn't my intent, but it's kind of nice, if you can get some facts out, that's always a good thing. And it's remarkable, though, the messages that I've been getting, DMs and comments on those posts and stuff, people saying they've been told there are dead bodies hanging in trees, and FEMA is arresting people and seizing materials, and it's just it's kind of insane, to be honest. I don't really know.
Hey, Ken, I certainly want you to continue the story, but with regard to the comments you're getting back, are you getting comments back from other people on the ground that are agreeing that there's just a crazy amount of nonsense about this?
Yeah, there have been quite a few. I've gotten comments from people I know in the Black Mountain area, some around Asheville, as the power is starting to come back on. And I just saw an update this morning. About 90% of the people in the one of the important things to understand about this disaster is it is a huge area. It's literally a quarter of the total acreage of North Carolina that was in fact affected to some degree. I think the power companies have announced this morning they've got a little less than 90% of the people that lost power have it back now. The problem is the remaining 10% are really isolated, and it's going to take forever, for those people that are completely wiped out. But yes, as they are coming back online, people are seeing this post that I put up last Friday and sending me messages saying, thank you. We had no idea this crap was going around, these garbage stories and all these lies, and that it was being propagated. And we really appreciate you getting a little bit of the truth out of there. So that feels nice. I've kind of like that element. Yeah. It's the whole viral aspect is a little creepy. I've told everybody if I'd known I was going to get 5,000 shares, I would have probably put a little more effort into it.
Well, I got to tell you, those of us who actually, actually cultivate a Facebook page are incredibly jealous.
I have had a couple of. I'm used to that actually. I've hit the front page of Reddit a couple of times, and both of my sons are big Redditors, and so for their dad to have, like 5 times the karma they do just drives them crazy. I barely even understand how it works. But I do a little photography and stuff, and sometimes that stuff has gotten pretty popular. But it really, it's offensive, I think, to people on the ground to realize the level of attempting to politicize this.
Yeah.
And it happens in my experience. I've got some direct experience because I did disaster response work earlier in my career. I'm in North Carolina. We've had our share of hurricanes. There's always a backlash about FEMA after a hurricane. I understand this is a blue-leaning podcast. This may not be a very popular statement. Bush caught a lot of flack about FEMA's response after Katrina. So I think it was just a lot of it is based on a public misconception of what FEMA does.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, they don't have stormtroopers. They're not going to parachute in battalions of, they're usually just a guy in a red windbreaker and a white hardback, and he's got a radio and a checkbook. That's FEMA. And what they do is coordinate the response of other agencies. Now, the reason that was such a disaster after Katrina was the local agencies had just disintegrated. So FEMA there's nobody to help. There's nobody to work with. But I really think that's the playbook that Trump and Vance are trying to run with now, is the same kind of damage that Bush took after Katrina and pin that on Biden. And it starts with that seed of, there's always frustration with FEMA because people don't understand what it is, what it does. But
it's one of the smallest federal agencies.
It is. It's tiny. We don't want them to have 100,000 stormtroopers because we'd be paying them to sit around on their rear ends 11 months out of the year. So that's just not how they work, and it's not. But that's the perception that people have. So it makes it a very easy target because you're always going to have people, and especially a disaster area that covers a quarter of the state of North Carolina.
And that's just North Carolina.
Exactly. And I have no doubt there are people that haven't seen a FEMA person. They're going to be concentrated in population areas. They're going to be coordinating with nonprofits, stuff like that. FEMA's not going to charge through your neighborhood waving a flag and driving an armored personnel carrier or something.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because, I mean, I've actually learned, something new today. So it's like, I sort of had it in my mind that, there's sort of like a squad of people, maybe not, 100,000, but more than just, a guy hard hat and a checkbook, that's going around. So that really changed, I mean, I thought they were like a Red Cross, except, more.
The truth is they have a tiny staff, and most of the people that are actually on the ground, they're like federal government. This is some guy that retired from the Corps of Engineers 2 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And they stay on this call-up list. And they call these people up, and they show up in like a white Ford Explorer with a red, like I said, a red, one of those cheap jackets, you know what I'm talking about, a windbreaker looking thing, and a hard hat. That's pretty much who they are and what they do. Now, once you've got the military and law enforcement, and holy cow, you ought to see the law enforcement up there. It's unbelievable. I saw deputy sheriffs there's 100 counties in North Carolina. I bet you I saw 50 of them. Just the law enforcement personnel that are up there helping out.
Yeah.
The military presence is huge. When we were at that, where we were setting up a new distribution point was also a staging area for search and rescue folks. I had a Black Hawk going over my head like every 5 minutes.
Well, they brought in 101st Airborne now.
The 82nd and the 101st, and they've got in Chinook helicopters from the Connecticut Air National Guard, which, see, the North Carolina National Guard didn't have. The Chinook helicopters are the real heavy lifters. That's how you get cargo in there. North Carolina doesn't have any of those. The Connecticut National Guard flew theirs down, and now they're doing the really heavy lifting with cargo up into the high country.
And for folks that understand the significance of the 101st Airborne, they're a helicopter unit. That's how they're airborne. They fly in helicopters. They have probably more helicopters than any other unit
they really
in
do.
the Army.
That is their standing operating procedure. That's how you get around when you're with the 101st.
And when you're in mountains, that's what you need.
Right.
The Cajun Navy isn't going to help you a whole lot in North Carolina.
Although they are up there. I do want to
know.
Say that, the Cajun Navy is up there. I saw like a food kitchen kind of thing that they were setting up, and there were signs for, reporting here, checking here. So they are there, but the boats aren't doing a lot.
Just for some perspective, numbers wise, of course, now the focus is starting to shift to Florida, because that is one hell of a storm that is coming. It's going to be a killer. I mean, literally, it's going to be a killer.
Yep.
And there are, I think I heard the number, 1,200 FEMA people assigned to the entire state for this one. And that's more than 10% of their entire workforce.
Exactly. Yeah. Tampa's going to get hammered. I mean, it's
my God.
And I feel for them, to say the truth. But the other thing, the other big lie is that FEMA doesn't have. They used all their budget on immigrants or some crap like that. That was another one you're hearing all over the place.
Yeah.
But it's just that I think they're an easy target. You can always find. Here's an illustration. Everybody's been talking about all the private helicopters that are working kind of in the North Carolina high country. I didn't see a single private helicopter. Now, that's not saying I could have come back and said, oh, this is all crap. It's not saying that. It just means it's a huge area. And the private helicopters, from what I understand, are working out of the Hickory Airport, which is on completely the other side of the disaster area. So my point being that with that many people and that much space involved, just about anything you can say about it is going to be true somewhere. So my right-wing friends are saying, oh, I saw this person on the news that was being interviewed. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you go dig deep enough in a holler up there somewhere, you're going to find somebody that hasn't seen a FEMA person and hasn't seen a government helicopter. Over on the side where I was at, I didn't see any private helicopters. I saw a ton of law enforcement, but it is a massive area, just geographically and in terms of roads. And it's even bigger in a literal sense. It's because of how hard it is to get around now, because so many roads and bridges are gone. So, the convoys I was doing with last week going up from Charlotte, that should have been about an hour and 20-minute drive. It took us 4 hours because it's convoluted, and you got these little connections, these little dirt roads, that still exist, that's still accessible, that kind of stuff. It is incredibly hard to get anywhere up there right now. So the effective area is even bigger than the acreage, I guess, because of the convoluted way you got to get around. And go ahead.
One thing I want to note about, the motivation for denigrating FEMA and talking bad about them is, let's be realistic. Project 2025 has an entire chapter dedicated to getting rid of FEMA and other federal
and National Weather Service and NOAA. It
Yeah.
just infuriates me. I cannot conceive of anything more stupid. And the problem is both of them have tiny budgets. The only reason the Republicans care about dismantling either one is because they insist on factoring climate change into their equations. And that's the only reason they want to dismantle those two organizations. And it's that out of all the dumb things I've heard, God, of 2025, but that one just absolutely drives me nuts.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's juvenile and punitive is what it is.
Well, everything that Trump says is an allegation, is a confession. And I read something about the $155 million that he supposedly took from a disaster fund and did use it for immigration detention. So.
Yep. You're exactly right. It's like a confession every time you have.
Every time. Oh my goodness. That's why I listen. I'm like, okay, what's he saying? Because he did it. Where's the lawyers? Come here.
So Ken, you probably don't, you don't know the backgrounds here, but 3 of the people on this podcast are former Republicans.
Never again, buddy. Never again.
4. I guess it would be 4. Yeah.
I'm from Texas. I'm from
and
Texas.
speaking for myself is because, at some point I couldn't take the lies anymore. It's like, that's not how it works.
As soon as they chose Trump, I was out of there. I was like,
I will say I bailed a little earlier.
I bailed then. I should have bailed earlier.
For me, it was the reaction when Obama got elected. Was so.
Me too.
It was so blatant.
Yeah, that was
racist. And I was like, this guy's a moderate Democrat. Okay, why are you all losing your minds? And it just became so clear that it was just pure racism.
I had the exact same reaction. I was just, I got it, but then it just was relentless and insane.
Right.
Yeah.
And when I look at it now, I was a conservative in the late 90s when we thought facts were important. We thought free markets were important. We thought that separation of church and state was really important.
Very important.
We considered ourselves the reasonable counterbalance to the liberal hysteria of the left, and now I don't know what the hell the Republican Party is. It's like
it doesn't exist anymore.
Well, they're definitely not conservative. It's like this weird mishmash of Jesus and Ayn Rand. And
that's a good one. Yeah.
I just can't get my head around it.
You said Ayn Rand. So when I was a Republican and I had one of my Republican friends say, "Oh, you got to read this. You got to read The Fountainhead. You got to read this." And I read it, and all I could think of, I tried it like 4 or 5 times. I couldn't get through it, and every time I kept coming back. This is just an apology to make you feel better about being an asshole. That's all it was. This was an excuse to be an asshole.
That's actually even when I was a young man and read Ayn Rand, I was like, wow, this is just somebody with a sledgehammer. This is not this is not art. This is not writing. And oh my God, railroads, what the hell?
So I want to ask Louis something. Louis has been patiently, quietly sitting here listening. He is our professional Democrat, and I say that with honestly all great respect. What are your thoughts here as you watch this madness?
Well,
which
I'm
part?
very practical. I'm probably like one of the more conservative Democrats here. I've been a Democrat my whole life. At the end of the day, it just comes down to, winning an election. I don't know. I just think that it's going to come down to about 2 states, and we just got to focus on that. But the one thing I'll say about Arizona, though, because that's where I'm at, is I've been noticing there is a shift. I do think that Harris does have a chance to take Arizona, maybe even more so than I said last.
Yeah.
Yay, I'm starting to love you, Louis.
Yeah.
She still hates me.
Bad news last week.
No, I
love you all.
No, the reality is that it still is an advantage for the Republicans in terms of a registration, boost.
Right.
I was doing some precinct walking yesterday for a candidate out here in my district on city council. And I will say that Trump is strong. It is not going to be easy. It is not. Yeah. It's going to come down to a numbers game. Some people turned us away only because we were, Democrats.
Really?
So it's enthusiasm is good, but I think realism is more important in this election. It's going to come down to it. No matter what we think, people are still going to vote for the guy.
Yep.
Let me go back to Ken real quickly. So Ken, you're from the area in Western North Carolina. You know the people. You were just there, obviously, as we've been discussing. I know you're in Phoenix now, but that's okay. That's temporary.
Right. I'm going home Friday. Yes.
So I've seen some articles, and common sense tells me that when your roof is a blue tarp, you've got bigger things to worry about than elections. Yeah. I'm wondering what are your thoughts about what the turnout is going to be? Because that is the Trump part of the state.
Well, no, they are very red counties, but I would not. But Asheville is the bluest of the blue part of the state.
Yeah.
And now I think Asheville will. Those people will probably get out to the polls. The rural areas tend to be more red. And I think that will still be a challenge. Oh, that was my other favorite conspiracy theory. I don't know if you heard that one. That Democrats use weather control to steer.
Yeah,
we heard that one.
That was my favorite. Now, I tell you the truth. I'm very hesitant about any kind of predictions. I thought Trump was laughably no way impossible, because right up until election day in 2016, I genuinely couldn't get my head around the fact that anybody would go in a booth and vote for him. You know,
Right.
so
Yeah.
I've been wrong once before. But I was starting to really get a sense, and maybe this is just wishful thinking, that North Carolina was starting to lean blue before the hurricane. And in our case, it's all because of the dumpster fire that is Mark Robertson.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's talk about noxious. You know, this is a guy that wants to bring slavery back, and he'd like to own a few.
What?
If it weren't for the hurricane, we'd be talking about Mark Robertson.
Yeah.
But
Right.
he is
Yeah.
so spectacularly bad. And
Yeah.
then all of the top candidates, because only the extremist Republicans vote in the primaries, they have picked. It's an absolute clown show of people they've got in those top slots for statewide positions on the ballots. Even the attorney general candidate they got, he's the guy that wrote the bathroom bill and embarrassed the entire state. He's got nothing to worry about than where you pee, apparently. And so I was starting to feel like that we're always going to have a pretty strong red streak in North Carolina, but I was starting to feel like the slate for state candidates was so bad that it was actually going to suppress Republican turnout, because I am seeing less enthusiasm in the Republican Party in North Carolina than I can remember seeing.
Right.
You got to drive a
Thank
long way.
God.
Yeah, you really do. You got to drive a long way to spot a Trump sign in somebody's yard, and that's unusual for North Carolina.
Right.
And you don't see any Mark Robinson signs.
I was genuinely surprised. As I said, you know, before the show, I literally drove through that part of the state, right through Asheville, right through, you know, Unicoi, all that area, 2 days before the storm.
Right.
And I was surprised with how few.
Now
Trump
that
signs.
doesn't mean it's become enlightened. You'll still see a lot of Confederate flags.
Oh yeah,
more of those than Trump signs, which is
Yeah.
weird, you know. So I was starting to have that hunch that maybe North Carolina finally is going to go blue. I'm sure it'll still be tight, but I got this feeling about it that there's a lot less enthusiasm and energy on the Republican side, and now I do think. I mean, I don't want to be happy that people in the western counties, it's going to be more difficult for them to vote, you know, in the rural areas. I don't want to enjoy that fact, but I think it probably is going to have a real effect.
Yeah. Well, the last poll that I saw on 538 about an hour or so ago, composite polling, was that Kamala was I want to say about a point and maybe a little bit more down, which means definitely within striking distance and definitely within the margin of error. So it wouldn't take a whole lot of people not showing up.
And nobody would have predicted that 6 months ago.
No. Interesting times, really indeed. I'm wondering also what's the effect in Florida, because I mean I've been around. I'm born and raised in Florida, lived in Texas. I've seen a lot, and Louisiana. I've seen a lot of hurricanes all my life.
Same.
This one is going to be an absolute killer, and I don't say that lightly. If you're in Tampa, chances are either you're going to die or somebody you know is going to die.
The weatherman even had tears talking about it. Oh, it broke my heart.
I mean, it's like me, you know, it's like, you know, I go see the labs. I know that you've got cancer, and I've got to go tell you, and you don't know yet. And it's like that guy was seeing in his mind the people that are going to die.
Yeah.
We have a forecaster with my company, like internally. We have some meteorologists that produce internal forecasts, and they will usually go a little farther ahead and maybe a little more than the National Weather Service does sometimes. Yeah. And those guys are scared to death. And the one that really, the forecast, when they found out that the storm is slowing, so it's probably going to be hitting Tampa Bay right about high tide, means
that's going to be death.
Downtown's looking at an 18-foot storm surge, and it's going to be apocalyptic down there. Yeah, it's going to be
apocalyptic is absolutely the word. You know, so where I used to live in Claremont, Florida, is right along the projected path, and that's that's the high, literally one of the highest points of the state. And they're still not talking about storm surge, but they're certainly talking about just the weather effects, because that thing's still going to be cat free as it crosses the state.
60 to 70 mile an hour winds in Orlando.
Yeah,
which
easily.
is what is that 2 hours inland probably.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to carve a path across the state. That's going to.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like that part of the state. It's so flat. I mean, you have a 20-foot storm surge. It's not going to just affect the beach and a couple of streets in. I mean, you're talking that's going to wash miles. And so,
Absolutely.
Well, and then the other thing that people don't really realize is when you have a storm like that, especially once it goes inland, is you then get the spin-off tornadoes. Now, maybe not so much in North Carolina because the hills kind of mitigate that, but in a place like Florida,
right?
That's I mean, those are the real killers.
It was very
we had a lot of
interesting.
those in Texas.
On Saturday, I spent Thursday and Friday upstate or in the high country in North Carolina. On Saturday, my company had crews working in the upstate in South Carolina. So I went down and worked with those guys for a day doing bridge inspections, actually, to make sure those were safe for the public. We work for the state. And the damage down there, it's they didn't get the flooding, but they got the tornadoes, they got the high winds, because it's not nearly as mountainous, it's a lot flatter. But you don't see it. You don't see a house down there that doesn't have a tree on it. Some of them have. There's a lot more of that kind of damage. Yeah. Whereas up in the mountains of North Carolina, it's all just gone. That's just flooding. Anything within 100 yards of a stream or a river is just destroyed.
Flooded.
I should have done my homework, but one of the things that I read over the past week was that there were literally trillions of gallons of rain that were dumped in that region. Which I mean, I don't even know how many zeros that is.
It's the classic Southeast story. Every epic hurricane we've ever had, Hugo, Fran in '96, Floyd was bad in '99. There's always a precursor event. And so we had a storm come through the mountains. Some of those towns were already at flood stage from rain that had nothing to do with Helene at all.
Right.
So you're already at flood stage. And then some of those places got 20 inches of rain in 6 hours. Which is, I was working outside during Hurricane Fran. That was '96, and we got 8 inches of rain in 6 hours, and it felt like standing at a waterfall. I drove right through that rain and went driving into Bristol, Virginia that day that I drove up through there. I was hydroplaning. I had to drop down to 45 and turn on the flashers because it was just it was as thick as I've ever seen it. A little bitty trout stream, a little stream that I used to fish on called Wilson Creek, got 20 feet above flood stage.
Good God.
It's just, and it has scoured, and the problem is in Appalachian communities, the only flat place to build on is in the bottom of the valley, next to the river and the creek. So all your buildings, all your roads, all your bridges, most of your businesses, they're down there next to the creek, next to the river.
Yeah.
I mean, my family's from Eastern Kentucky, so grew up learning how to drive on those roads. And
I'm from Southern West Virginia, right across the border. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so it's like I remember we had a flood in '64. The same thing where it'd been raining for several weeks, and so the ground was already soaked, and then. I think it was probably remnants of a hurricane that came up into Eastern Kentucky. And that's, I still remember, the creek on our farm was, 15, 20 feet above its banks.
Exactly. Yeah. And these places there's entire communities up there that just don't exist anymore. And the road to get there doesn't exist anymore.
Obviously, you absolutely would be remiss if you just don't wish the best for those people, regardless of their politics.
Absolutely.
Well, and I would conclude my report from my visit, I think, with a little bit of a positive note, which is, I shouldn't be surprised. I'm a hillbilly from West Virginia. Those are Appalachian people. They're my people. But I was really surprised at the number of people that I saw out. They weren't sitting around feeling sorry for themselves.
Helping.
Were absolutely. They were working. They were cleaning. They were shoveling out mud. You saw smiles and people wave at you. We were coming by with these trucks piled high, cargo nets strapped over them. And people would come out and smile and offer what they had. And the thing is they're going to need help, and they're going to need help for a long time. But that spirit that they have is still very much there. And I think as long as they got that and they get that help in hand they need, I think they're going to be fine.
Well, we've got about, a few minutes left here before our butts start hurting and we start to get hungry and move on to the next thing. But we are at literally 4 weeks now. And it's getting tight. You know, I do want to talk a little bit about where the polls are going, and I realize, you know, people don't look at polls. Well, yeah, you have to. But right now they are really tightening up, and I've been tracking since last week, our show. I've been tracking every single day where the totals are, and right now, electoral college wise, Kamala's still ahead if the polls hold.
Okay.
And having said that, they're also only within like a 1.5 of each other in those key swing states. In Arizona, you need to get your shit together. But anyway, so I'm going to just leave that and say, what do y'all think? I mean, where, and Louis, you watch this as assiduously as I do. So what's going on, man?
No, I would just add that if the polls hold and those people come out to vote, it's turnout. I mean, you know,
it is. Yeah,
it literally is. You know, you can have like you can be up 5 percentage points in the polls, but then those people don't show up.
Yeah.
Which the reason why Arizona scares me a bit, because the Republicans have an advantage in new registrations. Do those people come out to vote? I don't know. Did they already get convinced to vote by mail? I mean, it's hard to tell, right? So I put it this way: if the Republicans' advantage of registrations in Arizona equates to votes, they win Arizona.
If it equates to votes, and that is the real question.
Senators, and soon be another 2 Democratic senators. So I mean, it's, and you know, my thesis has been all along that these polls are not capturing votes that are going to be coming down and breaking to the Democrats. You know, and I think it's going to be the opposite of 2016, where literally the last 5 days, anybody that wasn't decided, they broke almost uniformly for Trump. Then, you know, and that no polls picked that up. And I think you're going to see the opposite. In fact, I think, you know, just based on, you know, you know, what I see is that there's a lot of people that are not, you know, going to come out in a poll, especially with, you know, the husband sitting there. There's a lot of women, I think, that will tell the pollsters, yeah, I'm voting for Trump. But as soon as they get in the booth, no way.
And I know some of those women that I didn't think would do that, but they've come to me and said they are not giving him their vote again. It's different. And my Texas friends with the abortion thing again, though, you can't even do the emergency abortions in the emergency room. I mean, come on, women, we got to fight like we've never fought before in our lives.
Well, to my eternal optimist, Stacy, I'm going to give you some good ammunition here. So
okay.
Some good news, because I want you to like me too.
I know. I love you all.
and that is that the polls that have come in, the ones that have been taken in October. So we're talking literally just a handful of polls that are showing up now. All seem to be trending towards Harris.
Oh yeah.
Still only a point and a half up, but there are more polls now showing up that have Harris in the lead than have Trump in the lead. So,
well, do you think her being on the media blitz is kind of helping? Because she's going to certain people, like the podcast I mentioned, call her daddy or whatever. You know, she's going to places you wouldn't think she would go, and I think so. A lot of conservative women actually watch that podcast. Yeah. I came across it and I'm like, what's this? Call me daddy?
Like, she was on the Howard Stern show today. So
yeah, I want to hear that one too.
Reach out to the bro vote.
She did a great job on The View, which, you know, probably more of a liberal crowd, but nonetheless, for any fence sitters out there. So, yes, I do think that helps. I also think the corollary to that is Trump just keeps saying stupid shit.
Yeah, well.
And turning people off. And I think there's a lot of people who are saying, yeah, I'll vote for Trump. And then when it comes down to it, they'll go like, nah, you know what? Y'all have good. I've got other stuff to do today.
I saw Laura Graham on Fox. Is that her name? She was kind of fact checking him about North Carolina, saying, oh, Kamala needs to be here. And she's like, well, she was here today. She was here for 3 hours. And then, you know, she was fact checking him. I'm like, oh, he's not going to like it. On Fox, Laura. Yeah, I have the link. Yeah. They were like standing there.
I'm going to tangent and segue from that point. And I think that you're getting real clues as to what's happening in real life by the way Trump and his acolytes are acting. I mean, the rhetoric is just getting darker and more violent. You know, I mean, I'm trying to imagine how much more can you ramp it up before, you just throw two guys in a cage and and they duke it out. Two go in, one comes out.
And this morning, my husband was like, "Stacy, you need to quit holding up your signs in your car." Because yes, I have a little handheld sign. I said, "I promise I won't hold them up when you're in the car because I'm willing to go down with the fight. So I won't jeopardize your life, but I'm ready to jeopardize mine." No.
But I think Eddie makes a great point, and I think we are seeing some desperation. I'm sure they've got some internal polling, which is making them take the message to more and more extreme positions. And honestly, it seems to me very stupid. Trump has always won about 46, 47%. That's what he's going to win this time. We all know that because he's a Fox News candidate. He's talking to Fox News people. He has never in his life done anything that could appeal to a moderate. If he had, this would be a slam dunk, honestly. If he could embrace some popular positions and this would be but he can't do that. He's always got to play to the base. And fortunately, that's the flaw the Republicans have always had, is they've got to keep playing to their base, get a little FaceTime on Fox News as their nirvana, or their ambrosia, basically. So I think he's going to get his 46, 47%. It's just all going to come down to the electoral college, unfortunately. We know what he's going to get. But I will say this, and I just see this in North Carolina. I can't speak to other states. We have a Democratic governor, and he's pretty popular. Cooper is well liked, oddly enough, on both sides of the aisle. Now, you've always got your right-wing extremists that are convinced. He's a lizard person, and he commands the Jewish space lasers or whatever. But I really think I'm kind of getting the vibe that a lot of these comments out of the Trump camp right now, slamming Cooper for response, there's a little backlash. I think that's also, there is a point, even for the hardcore Trumpkins, where it can go too far, I think.
Ray Cooper.
Yeah, and I think when he's taken a shot at North Carolina's governor in this storm response, there's this kind of sense like, whoa, that's not cool. That's not cool right now. We're trying to play politics with a disaster, and I think it's going to end up hurting him. I hope that it does, and I hope they kind of continue to crank up.
And Cooper came out and talked against what he was saying. That was
exactly.
Great.
It could be. He's been super effective. He's just like an aw shucks kind of Andy Griffith.
Well, to me, that to parrot Tim Walz, it's another damning thing to have all these Republican governors coming out and just literally shutting them down. It's like,
I love that they're doing that.
All of them except Ron DeSantis, who refuses to speak to the vice president.
It's just
and of course the Speaker of the House that refuses to call Congress back to appropriate more funds.
Right, to improve the budget.
This isn't even grown up. I mean, this is just dumb.
Yeah. Petty and juvenile, and I hope there will be a backlash against it, to be honest with you.
And they're not calling Congress back to do a new vote. That's going to probably piss a lot of people off that are in it, dealing with it on the ground.
I remind people every day, man, like it comes down to a game.
Yeah.
It literally is going to come down to about maybe 10,000 votes, if less, 2 states. We can feel how we feel, but
well, I mean, that's one of the things that, I'm seeing the Democrats here in Arizona have a tremendous ground game going. The Republicans nationally literally have zero. And, and I think that is going with their strategy. The election really starts at after all the votes are counted on November 5th, and it really starts on November 6th.
Yeah.
Which is, because that he's going to come out sometime saying, I've won. Everything's rigged. And, they've already got hundreds of ready to gin up lawsuits in every state that he, quote unquote, is rigged in, which means you're going to see lawsuits in Arizona, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia for sure. Any of this, Pennsylvania, any of the swing states. And
does anyone know the current numbers in Pennsylvania?
Oh, it's less than a point. She's ahead, but less than a point now.
If we lose Pennsylvania, we're not.
It's done.
We cannot win without Pennsylvania.
I know that. It's going to be very close.
Well, the good news is in the early voting that's come in, the votes that have come in have been 3-1, Democrat versus Republican. Now, that doesn't mean that
that's early voting. That's normal.
Right. In Pennsylvania or in national?
I don't remember the story because I was walking through the lounge, and
I would bet that was Arizona.
no, it was not Arizona. I think it was.
Okay.
I want to say it was Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, we'll know more next week for sure, as far as who's voted and you know
Yeah.
where it is. Maybe we'll have some more polls coming in as well. But we're at about the 40-minute mark, so I'm kind of wondering what else y'all got to say.
I was just one quick thing. I was talking to people yesterday as I was doing precinct walking, not the voters, but the people I was walking with, and I kept reminding them, remember the Hillary Clinton election? Like we cannot get too like
yes.
polls don't matter. You know?
No, I know.
Everybody's got to show up. Everybody's got to
Hey,
show
none
up.
of you mentioned Jack Smith's brief.
Right?
What
You're
up with
right.
that?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I
And
took a bunch of notes on that.
I
Wait.
know, that
It
looks
kept
such a clear
changing.
story
I was like,
4
all right,
days
that's
ago.
what we're going to talk about. And then all of this other stuff.
You know,
But-
And then what? Wake up tomorrow and Trump is dead. You know.
Yeah,
I mean,
from your lips to God's ears, Louis.
oh.
anything
But from
can
natural
happen.
causes, only from natural causes.
Oh, well, right, really.
Well, after looking at it, now I know he's going to fight tooth and nail and do everything in his power to win, or claim he won, because he doesn't want to go. He's got some good stuff in that brief. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does.
Well,
All
Ken,
right,
you were going to
listen.
make a point.
Yeah, but I think I forgot what it was.
Oh,
No,
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
the point I was gonna make was we've kind of played into Trump's hands. If you go over on like one of the Trump subreddits on Reddit,
yeah.
they are all saying they need to keep generating the false storm stories to keep attention away from
The brief.
The brief, yeah, exactly. To keep it out of the news cycle. I hate to say it's working, but everybody's talking about and now they're
You're
talking about
right.
the lies, but they're not.
There's this
talking
weird underworld of people that believe this stuff. It's
about, oh yeah.
I cannot tell you the number of people that I've run
think they
across.
actually believe it. I don't think they
Oh,
actually believe it.
I've run across some people that totally believe that we control weather.
So there's well, yeah, okay.
You know.
Well, there's this thing called a credibility display that sociologists talk about, where in like a cult environment, the more extreme and absurd belief you can profess, you actually earn credibility with other cult members because they
Yes.
say, wow, that guy's really devoted. He's really devout.
Say something long enough, people believe it. I mean,
Yeah, and I think that's why you have people show up at a convention with paper towels on their ears and people standing outside of a New York courtroom wearing diapers.
Yeah.
It's credibility.
It is a cult.
display. Yeah,
It's a
they're
cult.
trying to communicate to other members of the cult, look how devoted I am and look how serious I am. I hope they don't actually believe some of the crap that they're repeating. I hope, but maybe I'm just an optimist. I don't know.
But the other side of that is the more you do that, the crazier you look. The non-cult members who are just kind of along for the ride because their family's Republican, they've always been Republican. They're the ones like four of us here who go, whoa, wait a minute. That ain't right. I'm off this crazy train now.
But you got to remember, it's like speaking as an ex-chemical engineer, we've been distilling all the sane people out of the Republican Party for the last 10 to 20 years, and eventually all you've got left are the dregs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right now, the Republican Party is the dregs. That's all. I mean, that's all that's left. I mean, it's like there's no base to the Republican Party.
not anymore.
That's all it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And every one of my family and friends who are still diehard for him, I look at them so different. I'm like different. I'm just like, there's something wrong.
Because of where I was, what I was doing in Georgia, just outside of North Carolina, was dealing with a friend whose partner had died, long-term partner. It was a tragic situation. Absolutely not the kind of situation where I did anything political, didn't want to bring it up. I'm sure probably the only Democrat within, at least 2 square miles, if not more. And
that must have been hard.
And that was really difficult. That really was difficult. I was worn out after about 4 or 5 days there, and I'm going back in 2 weeks. So,
the farther you go out on a limb with believing something absurd and professing something absurd, the more you hate to be around people who don't.
Very good point.
It undermines kind of that belief system.
Absolutely.
And so, there's an awful lot of like families that aren't talking, that are
Yeah,
whatever.
mine.
Yeah, because the Trump supporters, it is personally threatening to
Correct.
them to
Yeah.
interact
Yeah.
with people who are not. They've got their media bubble,
I think it was it Ed, or I can't remember who I shared this with, but the first story about the armed women for Trump. When I went to my client's office, I thought
Oh,
she was
yeah.
joking. Yeah,
No.
she gave me long story short. I was meeting with a client up in
Prescott Valley.
Yeah, right. The different part of Arizona, very conservative. And she gives me a flyer to attend a rally when Trump was running the first time around. And I literally thought it was a joke. But
Oh gosh.
it was her with a bullet belt and a semi-automatic weapon saying "Armed Women for Trump, join us at the rally tomorrow."
Wow.
And I thought it was a joke. So I kind of grinned and no, she was serious. There's people out there that think we're
They
crazy.
really are.
And a lot of them believe the AI generated photos.
Yep.
Well,
They think that's him. Yeah.
and
he has a
it's
six-
oh yeah, wading through the water.
All right.
wait, carrying,
It's
That's
going to
sad though that people believe it.
It's going to get worse, because even for me, it takes a conscious act of will to break out of a media bubble, and because Google News and all these other news aggregator sites are constantly trying to feed me stuff that I will click on. There's no agenda there, but they see what I click on. They know what I'm interested in. They want to give me more just to harvest more clicks. Facebook does it. Google News does it. And so the media bubble and now this is all going to be AI controlled. I'm going to have an AI that's judging what I've read and how long I looked at that web page, and did I scroll all the way to the bottom?
Where you've been, where you're going, all that stuff.
Yeah, so I pity these people a lot, because I know I'm close enough to understand the media bubble that they are in. I know how addictive it is to turn on Fox News and get told, if you're an old white person, everything would be great if they would just listen to us. Right. Because, we're old and white, and the world is not gray, it's black and white. That's addictive. It really is. It's hitting a point where people are scared and they're a little bit weak. And then you go online and you get, you will see more on Facebook stories from your friends that you liked last time. And that's probably somebody that was in that same media bubble you are. And it gets tighter and tighter and tighter and more insulated. And they're just not exposed to anything that might challenge their belief system.
Challenge their belief system. That's the thing.
That's the thing. Yeah.
And you got to kind of feel sorry for them. I feel like a lot of it's based on fear,
Yeah, me too.
Insecurity. Yeah. We're getting old, and we're not running the world anymore. We're not, the dominant whatever white people run everything.
And not being exposed to other people, this and that. I mean, it all plays
exactly. Yeah. And they're scared. I feel bad for them, but it's going to get worse, I think.
Absolutely.
Well, we're running up on 50 minutes, and we try to limit ourselves. I mean, we've obviously got lots to talk about.
Oh, I know it, right?
I'd love to see Ken back here if he wants to come back. I'm just going to say that right now.
I'm not going to visit a disaster zone every week.
No, but we could use your voice.
We like to hear your voice. It's like,
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Point of view that I think lovens us out. So we'd love to have you back.
Well, awesome.
Well, just his voice alone, the man should have been in radio.
I love it. I know.
I worked in radio years ago.
There you go.
Okay, how did you?
The classic face for radio,
Who are you telling, buddy?
This is before we were doing video on podcasts.
Yep.
Well, anyway, I think we've gotten a lot. Harry, you want to sign us off?
I just listen. Thanks everybody for showing up. It's been fun as usual. I hope anybody who ever listens to this has as good a time as we do.
Yeah. And who knows what we're going to talk about next week? Because I'm sure 1,000 things are going to happen.
New polls will be out for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's going to get tighter than Dick's headband.
Voter registration deadline in Arizona, for example, and a lot of other states was yesterday. So it's it.
All right, then. Well, listen, thanks, everybody. It's 49 minutes and 18 seconds, and we are out of here.
See ya.